Hi, friends. Today's reflection is for September 15th, and it is the memorial of Our Lady of Sorrows. That word sorrows is such a heavy word, maybe especially these days. When I hear the word sorrow, I think about people on the West Coast who are suffering through these wildfires, so much loss of life, loss of home. I think about people who are suffering through the pandemic, through the long-term effects of COVID, or who are sick now with the virus, or those who've lost loved ones. Many people have lost their jobs and are suffering through food insecurity or unable to pay the rent. Then there are the personal sorrows that people carry. I don't think any of us is going to escape this life without some sorrow. Mary, the mother of Jesus, certainly knew sorrow, especially as she stood at the foot of the cross as her son died. Mary's faith through her sorrow is an example to us. This wasn't the first time she suffered, nor was it the last. Traditionally, there are 7 sorrows of Mary, 3 during the early years of Jesus' life, and 4 on Good Friday. Mary reminds us of the women who become pregnant unexpectedly and are shunned by their families, or young families who have babies without the basic things that they need. She reminds us of parents whose children are accused of crimes they did not commit and are sentenced to death. Her faith held her strong through all of that suffering. But more than just an example to us, she understands our sorrow and she stands with us in our suffering as our mother. No matter what our sorrow might be, grief, loss, fear, illness, loneliness, Mary stands with us and she shows us consolation. She helps us find consolation. At the foot of the cross, Mary must have felt helpless. There was nothing that she could do. All she could do was be present. She could have compassion. It's a word that means suffering with. And this is the message I take from today. Take with me is this word compassion. Listen to today's gospel reading from the Gospel of John. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his home. Jesus placed his suffering mother in the care of the disciple. In the midst of our suffering, we may wonder about Jesus' care for us. And this is why we need each other. At the end of his life, Jesus told us that we are to take care of each other. Even during our suffering, we are to reach out to those others who are suffering and take care of them however we can. The thing is, we know that the rest of the story, Jesus' death on the cross, was not the end of the story. His resurrection and his presence with us today is what gives us hope and faith through our suffering. During these challenging times, fire and disease and death and loss, some will feel despair. Sometimes we're not able to alleviate this suffering. Sometimes we are. But what we can do is offer hope. Mary's the perfect model of hope. Even in the midst of her 7 sorrows, she never despaired. Her faith endured. We believe that her intercession can help us to do the same. Just as Mary stood at the foot of the cross with compassion, we're called to be compassionate toward those who suffer, giving them hope, reminding them that God's present with them, always with us. Being compassionate reminds me of the corporal and especially the spiritual works of mercy. These are the actions that we can take to extend God's compassion to those in sorrow. The corporal works of mercy are the kinds of acts that we can do to help our neighbor with their material and their physical needs. Things like feed the hungry, shelter the homeless, clothe the naked, visit the sick and imprisoned, bury the dead, give alms to the poor. The spiritual works of mercy are acts of compassion to instruct the ignorant, counsel the doubtful, admonish the sinners, to bear wrongs patiently, to forgive offenses willingly, to comfort the afflicted, to pray for the living and the dead. We can always pray. Today I pray to Mary to intercede for those who are in sorrow, for those suffering on the West Coast, for those around the world coping with the pandemic. Pray that she will help those who suffer feel the love of Jesus amid suffering. And I pray that we can be God's love for those who need it. I keep all of you in my prayers, and I thank you for the prayers you send my way. Until I see you again, I wish you peace.